The tools felt heavy in Dave's hands. His father's old level, a tape measure worn smooth from decades of use, a hammer whose handle bore the impressions of calloused fingers. Dad would have known exactly how to handle Monica Wilkins. Thomas Peterson had been a man of few words, but effective actions. The kind of neighbor who silently shoveled everyone's walkways after a snowstorm without waiting for thanks. "What would you do, Dad?" Dave muttered, fingering the measuring tape. His phone buzzed with a text from Roberto next door. "Dude, she's writing you up again. Something about your hedge being 2 inches too high on the north corner." Dave moved to his living room window. Sure enough, Monica stood at the edge of his property, HOA citation pad in hand, measuring tape extended against his meticulously maintained boxwoods. She made a great show of shaking her head disapprovingly before scribbling on her pad. This was the 3rd citation this month. At $75 per violation, Monica's vendetta was becoming expensive. Dave had already paid $450 in fines this year, money that should have gone toward his nephew's college fund. He watched as Monica finished her citation, marched up his walkway, and slipped the pink paper under his door with practiced efficiency. Before the paper had settled on his entryway tile, she was already strutting back to her house, phone pressed to her ear. "You won't believe what Peterson's done now, Brenda," her voice carried across the quiet street. "Completely disregarded the hedge height regulations. Again. This neighborhood was pristine before he let things slide." Dave stood frozen, citation in hand. Let things slide? He mowed his lawn twice weekly. His flower beds had won the Garden Club Award 3 years running. His Christmas lights were always installed precisely on the day after Thanksgiving and removed on January 2nd. Never early, never late. The irony burned. Before Monica's arrival, Dave had been considered the neighborhood standard-bearer, the resident others consulted before making exterior changes. Now he was being painted as Sunnyside Estate's problem child. Opening his laptop, Dave pulled up the neighborhood Google Drive, where all HOA documents were stored. He clicked on the member directory, scrolling to GUI for Wilkins. There it was, Monica's professional headshot. Who puts a professional headshot in a neighborhood directory? Her contact information and her occupation: Regional Manager, Wilkins Property Management. Property management. Of course, Monica wasn't just a garden variety Karen. She was professionally trained in the art of regulatory harassment. Dave closed his laptop and returned to the box of his father's tools. The measuring tape had a worn spot exactly at the 4-foot mark. The height his dad had insisted was perfect for garden accessibility. Dave smiled, remembering how Thomas Peterson had built a small putting green in their backyard when Dave was 10. Everyone needs a place to play, Dad had insisted when Mom questioned the expense. A place to play. Dave's eyes drifted to his driveway, the driveway he couldn't use because of Monica's strategic parking. The rarely used driveway that occupied prime real estate in a neighborhood where every square foot was subject to HOA regulations. His father's level caught the afternoon light, its bubble perfectly centered between the lines. Balance. That's what Dad would have sought. Not revenge, but balance. Dave's fingers moved to his phone, opening the browser. Portable putting green, he typed, a slow smile spreading across his face. If Monica was going to prevent him from using his driveway as a driveway, perhaps it was time to find an alternative use for the space, one that would restore the balance to Sunnyside Estates and remind everyone what neighborhoods were supposed to be about. Dave spent the next 3 days in a creative frenzy. His dining table disappeared beneath printouts of mini golf course designs, architectural sketches, and HOA bylaws covered in highlighter. The garage transformed into a workshop where sawdust hung in the air like snow. Through it all, the memory of his niece and nephew's joy at Potter's Paradise fueled his determination. "What exactly are you building in there?" Roberto called over the fence Tuesday evening as Dave tested the hinge mechanism for the windmill's rotating blades. Proportional response, Dave replied with a cryptic smile. His phone pinged with a notification from the neighborhood security app. Monica had just reported suspicious construction noise at his address. The timestamp showed she'd filed the complaint from a yoga retreat in Sedona -200 miles away. Even on vacation, her surveillance continued. Dave ignored the notification. He'd already confirmed with the city that residential construction was permitted between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. Monica's complaint would go nowhere, but her awareness of his activities worked perfectly into his plan. Let her wonder, let her worry. The anticipation was half the pleasure. Wednesday morning, Dave called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Today's mission required perfect timing. At 1:15 p.m., Monica's white Mercedes pulled away from her driveway. The HOA executive committee meeting started at 1:30, and Monica, as secretary, prided herself on militant punctuality. She would be gone until at least 3:45 p.m. Dave didn't waste a second. His phone buzzed with the signal from Lucas, his 12-year-old neighbor who'd been enlisted as lookout in exchange for first play privileges. Operation Mini Golf is a go, the text read, followed by a golf ball emoji. With military precision, Dave began unloading components from his garage. The modular putting green, crafted from specialized turf over interlocking weatherproof tiles. The windmill, whose blades had been painted the exact shade of Monica's Mercedes. Ramps and tunnels designed for perfect ball trajectory. Solar-powered fairy lights that would illuminate the course at dusk. Roberto appeared with his teenage sons, who'd been sworn to secrecy. Mrs. Chen brought her granddaughters, each carrying miniature flags for the holes. Mr. Washington from down the block arrived with putters he'd found at a thrift store. What had begun as Dave's solitary mission had somehow evolved into a neighborhood conspiracy. 6 minutes ahead of schedule, Dave noted as the main structure took shape. The course was designed to be both functional and symbolic. The final hole positioned exactly where Monica's car typically blocked his exit. "She's going to have an aneurysm," Roberto whispered, admiring the windmill's Mercedes white blades. "It's completely within regulations," Dave reminded him. "Temporary, removable, recreational, on my property." "I know, but still." Roberto gestured to the handmade sign Dave was installing at the driveway entrance. "Peterson's Putt-Putt. Open whenever Karen's car blocks my exit." Dave straightened the sign, just stating facts. As the finishing touches were applied, Lucas sent another text, "Dragon Lady's car turning onto Maple Drive. ETA 3 minutes." The neighbors scattered to hiding spots with the practiced efficiency of a SWAT team. Dave positioned himself casually beside the windmill, putter in hand, as if he'd been there all afternoon. In the distance, he could hear the distinctive purr of Monica's Mercedes approaching. Dave took a practice swing, sending a golf ball through the windmill's rotating blades, hole in one. Perfect timing. Monica's face remained frozen in that peculiar expression of outrage, jaw slack, eyes bulging, nostrils flared, as Dave casually took another sip of lemonade. The gathered neighbors held a collective breath, children clutching their putters like shields. Even the birds seemed to pause their singing, as if nature itself awaited Monica's eruption. When it came, it was magnificent. This is, you can't possibly." Her designer handbag slipped from her shoulder, hitting the pavement with a thud as she gesticulated wildly at Dave's creation. "The AUDACITE." Dave nodded sympathetically. "I know. The craftsmanship really is something, isn't it? Roberto's boys helped with the loop-de-loop. Natural talent. I'm not complimenting your monstrosity." Monica's voice climbed to a pitch that made dogs 3 blocks away start howling. She jabbed her manicured finger at the windmill. "Those blades are a deliberate mockery of my vehicle." Dave examined the windmill with exaggerated surprise. I suppose there is a resemblance. Pure coincidence, I assure you. I was going for generic luxury sedan white, but the hardware store only had entitled Mercedes Pearl." A muffled snort of laughter escaped from behind Mrs. Chen's hydrangea bush, where several neighbors were poorly concealing themselves. Monica whirled toward the sound, her eyes narrowing as she realized the scope of the conspiracy against her. "You've turned the entire neighborhood against me?" she hissed at Dave. "Actually, Monica," Dave said quietly, setting down his lemonade, "you did that all by yourself." For a moment, Just a fleeting instant. Something like hurt flashed across Monica's face. Then the mask of indignation slammed back into place. She snatched her HOA handbook from her bag, flipping through pages with such violence that several tore at the corners. Section 3.27, she read aloud, voice trembling with fury. No permanent recreational equipment shall be installed in front yards or driveways. Correct? Dave agreed pleasantly. That's why everything here is modular and removable. He bent down, lifted a section of the putting green, and revealed the untouched driveway beneath. See, not a single permanent fixture. Section 5.93. Monica continued, flipping frantically. All exterior installations must maintain the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. Dave gestured to the colorful fairy lights, the cheerful flags, the meticulously crafted obstacles. I'd say this adds considerably to the aesthetic harmony, certainly more than a car perpetually blocking a driveway. Monica's eyes darted desperately between Dave, the mini golf course, and her handbook. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the pleasant temperature. For the first time since moving to Sunnyside Estates, Monica Wilkins had encountered a problem she couldn't solve with a citation. "This isn't over, Peterson," she said finally, voice low and dangerous. "Emergency HOA meeting. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. "Looking forward to it," Dave replied, retrieving his putter. "Will you be parking in front of my driveway until then, or would you like to try a round? First-time players get a handicap." Monica's response was not suitable for the children present. She stalked back to her Mercedes, engine roaring to life with unnecessary force. As she pulled away, her tires screeched dramatically on the pavement, a noise violation that several neighbors dutifully recorded on their phones. That, Roberto said, emerging from his hiding place, was the single greatest moment in Sunnyside Estates history. Dave watched Monica's car disappear around the corner, a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease settling in his stomach. The battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. Tomorrow's HOA meeting would be the true test. "Well," he said, turning to the gathered neighbors with a smile that masked his concern, "who's ready for the inaugural Peterson's putt-putt tournament?" The cheer that went up could be heard all the way to Monica's house, where she sat in her immaculate kitchen, making phone calls that would set the stage for tomorrow's showdown. The monthly Sunnyside recreational rotation had become the highlight of neighborhood life, transforming what had once been a collection of isolated households into a genuine community. This Saturday, Dave stood back to admire his handiwork. The Halloween-themed putt-putt course, featuring a ghost-shaped sand trap and pumpkin obstacles that lit up when struck by golf balls. "The cobweb tunnel is genius," commented Roberto, testing the synthetic spider silk that partially obscured the path to the fourth hole. "How did you rig it to drop that plastic spider when the ball passes through?" "Trade secret," Dave winked, though he'd happily share the design with anyone who asked. The joy wasn't in keeping secrets, but in creating experiences that brought people together. Dave's phone buzzed with a text from Tyler Wilkins. "Mom left for her hair appointment. I'm sneaking over in 10. In the months since the HOA showdown, Tyler had become Peterson's putt-putt's most dedicated patron, though always when his mother was away. The teenager held the course record and had even contributed design ideas for several of the newer holes. Dave checked his watch. President Kingsley would be arriving soon with his grandchildren. Mrs. Chen was bringing her famous lemon cookies. The Patels were on refreshment duty. Everyone had fallen into comfortable roles in this new neighborhood tradition. Everyone except Monica. Her comment about his father still haunted Dave. How could she possibly have known Thomas Peterson? The question had lingered for months, but Dave had never found the right moment to ask. Their interactions since the HOA meeting had been coldly civil at best, a nod across the street, a perfunctory good morning where they happened to collect their mail simultaneously. At least she'd stopped parking in front of his driveway. The morning after the HOA meeting, Dave had awakened to find the street completely clear. By week's end, Monica's garage, previously filled with what neighbors speculated were designer shoes and handbags, had been emptied enough to accommodate her Mercedes. A small victory, but one that felt increasingly hollow as Dave watched the neighborhood bond while Monica remained isolated by choice, or perhaps by the walls others had built around her. "Incoming," Roberto muttered, nodding toward the street. Dave turned to see Monica walking purposefully across the road, not toward her usual destinations, the mailbox or her car, but directly toward his driveway. She wore casual clothes, a simple blouse and slacks, rather than her typical power suit, her hair pulled back in a ponytail instead of her immaculate bob. The neighbors fell silent, children instinctively moving behind adults, putters clutched like protective talismans. "Mr. Peterson," Monica said formally, stopping at the edge of the mini golf course. "May I have a word?" Dave nodded, leading her to a quieter spot beneath his maple tree, away from curious ears. Whatever this was, he sensed it didn't need an audience. "I received a call yesterday," Monica began, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "The Children's Hospital. They've had to cancel their annual fundraiser because their venue flooded." Dave waited, unsure where this was heading. "Tyler mentioned that your recreational installation has been quite popular." She seemed to struggle with each word. "I was wondering if you might consider hosting a small charity event for the children." Dave blinked, certain he'd misheard. "You want to bring sick kids to my mini golf course?" 20 teenagers from the oncology ward, Monica clarified, her eyes fixed on a point over his shoulder. Many of them were looking forward to this event all year. There it was again, that flicker of genuine emotion behind her carefully constructed facade. "Of course," Dave said without hesitation. "We'd be honored." The crowd spilled out of the community center into the warm evening air, buzzing with excitement. Neighbors clapped Dave on the back, children tugged at his hands asking when Peterson's putt-putt would reopen, and even stoic President Kingsley gave him a conspiratorial wink before departing with his wife. Dave stood on the community center steps, basking in the afterglow of victory, when he spotted Monica and her attorney in heated conversation beside her Mercedes. The lawyer kept shaking his head, gesturing with his hands in what appeared to be frustration. Monica's normally perfect posture had deflated, her shoulders slumped in a way Dave had never witnessed before. "Enjoy your moment, Peterson," Roberto said, joining Dave on the steps. "That was a masterclass in neighborhood politics." "Thanks," Dave replied, his eyes still on Monica. "I just wanted my driveway back. I didn't expect." He gestured at the dispersing crowd, many already making plans to visit his mini golf course the next day. "You gave people something to rally around," Roberto said. This neighborhood needed that. Monica's reign of terror was getting old. Dave nodded, but something tugged at his conscience. Victory felt sweet, but there was a hollowness to it he hadn't anticipated. Monica may have been a nightmare neighbor, but the hurt he'd glimpsed in her eyes during their confrontation lingered in his mind. "Go easy on her tomorrow," Roberto advised, following Dave's gaze to where Monica now stood alone, her attorney having departed. "She's going to be licking her wounds for a while." "Yeah," Dave agreed, though his thoughts were already turning to how he could improve the mini golf course. Maybe add a water feature where the third hole currently stood. The Chen grandkids would love that. As the parking lot emptied, Dave was surprised to see Monica approach, her designer heels clicking a decisive rhythm on the pavement. Her face was composed, but her eyes were rimmed with red. "Congratulations," she said stiffly. "You've won this round." Dave held up his hands. "It wasn't about winning, Monica. It was about being able to use my own driveway." "Oh, please." She rolled her eyes, some of her usual fire returning. "You could have filed a formal complaint with the city about my parking. Instead, you chose public humiliation. And you could have moved your car when I asked nicely," Dave countered, trying to keep his voice level. "Instead, you chose to fine me for ridiculous violations." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 years of petty warfare hanging between them. "My attorney says I have no legal recourse," Monica finally said. "Your installation is technically within regulations." "Yes, it is," Dave agreed. "But this isn't over," she added, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper he'd come to know well. "You may have won the neighborhood over with your little stunt, but I still have resources you can't imagine." Dave sighed. "Monica, why is this so important to you?" What did I ever do to make you target me specifically? Something flickered across her face, uncertainty, vulnerability, before her mask slipped back into place. Not everything is about you, Peterson, she snapped. Some of us actually care about property values and neighborhood standards. Before Dave could respond, Monica turned and stalked toward her car. But as she reached for the door handle, she paused and looked back at him. Your father would be deeply disappointed in what you've done to his house, she said, then slid into her Mercedes and drove away. Dave stood frozen on the steps. How did Monica know anything about his father? Thomas Peterson had died 2 years before she moved to Sunnyside Estates. The question lingered as Dave walked to his car, victory suddenly tasting like ashes in his mouth.